So let me welcome everyone to this talk and conversation today. This is part of the series that the Constitutional Law Center puts on, which we call Constitutional Conversations. This is not our usual date. It is not our usual time, so it is especially gratifying to see so many of our familiar faces here today. And I should add that the event today is also being co-sponsored by the Newcomb Center for the Rule of Law. I have to check my notes. The Israeli Studies Program at Friedman's Vogel Institute and the Z3 Project. I'm also asked to remind everyone to turn off your cell phones. I feel like this is the beginning of an opera performance or something. Turn off your cell phones, and just to remind everyone that neither photography nor recording is permitted, although the entire proceeding will be recorded and available later on our website. The way this is going to work is that our speaker is going to say a few words. He and I are going to engage in some conversation, and then we're going to have as much time as possible for you to ask the justice questions. And the way that needs to work is you come down to the two microphones you see here. Please speak into the microphone and identify yourself. That's for the benefit of the people who'll be seeing the program afterwards. You might queue up behind the microphones as well. So now it's my pleasure, but even more so my honor, to introduce the speaker for today. Now, it has been my privilege for a number of years to introduce quite a few people of considerable distinction. Over the years, I've introduced U.S. Supreme Court justices and other judges, university presidents and deans, prominent scholars and writers and senators and various people, generals of note. But I have to say I don't believe I have ever had the honor of introducing a person of such extraordinary distinction as retired Justice Eliakim Rubinstein, who is our guest for today. He embodies, in some ways, the history of our day. He has been involved. So as a young man, I guess you were probably about 30 or so, he was part of the Israeli delegation at Camp David. He's actually one of the two surviving members of the delegation. That was opened the way for the peace treaty with Egypt. Justice Rubinstein then was the lead Israeli negotiator of what I think is probably the most successful of the peace treaties in that area. That is the peace with Jordan. He's been engaged in negotiation with for further peace treaties with, I think, 3 or 4 other countries, not always quite as successful as that. In addition to that, so he was a civil servant. He's not political. He's never been elected. He doesn't belong, he's not affiliated with any of the parties, but he has served in governments in Israel under various parties. I can't say under both parties because, of course, in Israel the number is not 2. He served perhaps most famously as Attorney General for about 5 years before he went on the Israeli Supreme Court, where he served for, I didn't do the math, but a little bit less than 15 years. He was, and I think still is, the only Orthodox member of the Israeli Supreme Court. And in that capacity as a justice on the Israeli court, by the way, the Israeli court, as he may have occasion to talk about, is probably the most powerful and one of the most respected high courts of any country in the world. And I've been reading up on some of his decisions. He's handed down and been a part of a remarkable array of important decisions, many of them standing up for the rights of religious minorities within Israel. My personal favorite, although I don't know if it's the most earth-shattering, but my personal favorite is defending the right of an Arab Israeli justice on the Supreme Court. So one of his colleagues, who is non-Jewish, Christian actually, I believe, defending his right not to sing the Israeli national anthem at a formal occasion. And
I talked to him this morning, in fact.
Oh.
Yeah, he's not that well. This morning I talked to him, Justice Gibran. Yeah.
And this reminds me of, our great decision in West Virginia Board of Education against Barnett. And it stands in a symbolic way for the proposition that people can be free and equal citizens even under some of the most trying and difficult circumstances in the world. Well, when I first invited Justice Rubinstein to speak to us, we were expecting, he and I were expecting the topic to revolve around the controversies in Israel about reducing the power and independence of the Israeli Supreme Court. This has convulsed the country for many, many months. This year it was, I think, probably the biggest internal political crisis in the history of the Israeli state. I believe Justice Rubinstein was out himself demonstrating almost weekly against some of these measures, and so that was to be the topic, which is both about the proposed changes, but also about the very peculiar and I think from an American point of view so interesting situation of a court that exercises powerful constitutional judicial review, but without a constitution. Well, as I don't have to tell anybody in the room, events have taken place since that invitation that have somewhat eclipsed questions of judicial power. I was worried that the justice would not be able to come. I'm so glad that you're to be with us. And so, based upon his long experience as a diplomat in the Attorney General's office, as a leading figure in Israeli foreign policy and justice policy, he's also, I think, going to offer us some words and some reactions and reflections about what is going on in his country now in the midst of this terrible war. So with that, I'm going to stop talking and turn the floor over to Justice Eliakim Rubinstein.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Professor McConnell, Judge McConnell. It's an honor to be here. In fact, I was at Stanford 12 years ago at Hoover as a fellow for a short while, and I'm glad to be able to be here again. There's a story about President Kennedy visiting the Alcatraz prison not far from here, and he was supposed to address the inmates. He didn't know how to open up his remarks, and he said, "Well, I'm glad you're all here." So, don't take it personally. In fact, I was very friendly with the late Secretary George Shultz, whom now I saw they are having a new building named after him. I worked with him, and we befriended each other, and he and Judge Sofer invited me here. Then in Washington, I used to wear bow ties. When I was number 2 in our embassy many years ago, he was Secretary of State. He also liked bow ties. In Israel, it's eccentric. In Washington, it's acceptable. And whenever he saw me, he used to say, "These are the only ties that don't go into your soup." and so I'll dedicate these remarks to his memory. And as Professor McConnell said, I'll divide my remarks into two. I'll begin with the constitutional issue, but to be frank, my heart is in the other issue, in the war. And the war is still raging, and there are losses, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that and about our the circumstances that brought it all about. But, Israel, in a way, is a miracle, because the Jewish people were dispersed, all over the place. If you take my own extended family and nuclear family, they are my parents come from Russia, and my wife from Poland, but all the rest you have from Turkey, from Iraq, from Morocco, from Kurdistan, and from France, Britain, and Canada. So you have and the fact that we've been able to create the state, this is the Zionist enterprise, and 75 years ago, and to have the ingathering of the Jewish exiles on one hand, and the renewal of the Hebrew language, and the fact, when I was a kid in elementary school, most of my friends were teaching their parents the mother tongue, as one of our writers put it, because they spoke Arabic or Hungarian or Romanian or Polish or whatever. And the fact that we have this state, a democracy, within a part of the world which has no real democracy around, is in itself a miracle. But complexities are there. It was mentioned by our chair that we've been able to make peace with some of our neighbors. And for me to be at the airport in 1977, welcoming President Sadat of Egypt in a surprise visit which wasn't planned until a few days earlier, was really the wings of history were there. And the same with Jordan later and so on. These all have shaped our being a Jewish and democratic state. We don't have a full-fledged constitution, some of you may know, because Ben-Gurion, our founding father in the early years of the state, decided that we are not ripe for a full-fledged constitution because there were just 650,000 Jews when we started. Now there are more than 8 million, and there's still a conflict with the Arabs. So let's wait and create what's known as basic laws, that is chapters in the Constitution, which hopefully will be packaged and incorporated one day. I was hoping it will already have happened, but it didn't. And one of the pillars of our system is the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, Professor McConnell mentioned it's a strong institution. It is indeed. One of its, and it serves, I'm just saying on the informative side, it serves both as a court of appeal, basically like your circuit courts in a way. Professor Connell was a judge on on a circuit court, and as the Supreme Court here, unlike your, I would love to be a justice on your court because they take 70 cases a year, I think. We have 10,000. Well, it's a fact. What can I do? But the other side of this side, by the way, is not controversial. The appeal side, the controversial side, and that's what made this idea of reform or coup, whatever call it, this year, where is what's known as the High Court of Justice, which is that you can petition on government decisions or on parliamentary acts, laws, to the Supreme Court without going through the echelon of courts, just as an original jurisdiction. So it could be on gender issues, it could be on state and religion issues, it could be on Palestinians and settlements, it could be on equality issues, and the like. And the fact that you can petition right to the Supreme Court has made, of course, the court active and also controversial, because there are circles in Israel who believe, and I think it's exaggerated, but believe that the court is too liberal, too secular, too left-wing, and those circles are mainly more conservative, more right-wing, more religious. I think, as I said, it's exaggerated. You're not, that's not alien to you, that there are controversies around the court in this country, the conservative, liberal, the questions that come up in appointments of justices and judges. You're more familiar than I am. But so that is one of the elements that were initiated by the current Minister of Justice, current government, to try to change, inter alia, the way we appoint judges and justices. In Israel, we have a mixed system. Here you have the president appoints the federal with the consent of the Senate and so on. The states mainly are elected this way or the other in most of the states. In Israel, we have a selection committee of 9 persons, headed by a politician, a minister of justice. There's another minister. There are 2 parliamentarian Knesset members. There are 2 bar association representatives and 3 justices of the Supreme Court, the president and 2 others who rotate. I was for years a member of that committee. And it has been a rather successful story. Yitzhak Rabin, of blessed memory, whose name you may know, was assassinated. I was his cabinet secretary. He used to say the test of the result. The test of the result. Test of the result is that we have a good judiciary. Nothing is perfect, but there are 800 judges in Israel. A majority are women, not in the Supreme Court, but in the echelon. And it's clean, it's professional, and again, it may make mistakes. Sometimes the appointments are not what was expected, but by and large, and it's being respected abroad, and it has been, in a way, a shield. Israel is being all the time dragged this, or people try to drag it to the Hague Criminal Court. And our defense there is of 2 kinds. One is procedural, I won't go into that, and the other is, I was the chair of our delegation that established in the convention in the Rome Conference in 1988, which established that court. And we didn't join, like the US, because we felt it could be politicized. That's what I said in my speech originally. And we say, why are you here at the Hague Court? You're here for countries who do not have an enforcement, who do not have a judiciary that is honest, that is independent, and so on. We do have this kind of judiciary. I mentioned that because that is one of the arguments which are raised to oppose what's known as the judicial revolution or coup or whatever that was established this year. The ideas were basically to change the way we elect or select judges and justices, and the other also to weaken the Attorney General, who is also a strong position in Israel, is both the prosecution, the head of the prosecution, the head of the legal counsel to the government, and so on. The debate has been very, very strong, more than I think the people who initiated it expected. And for me, being a former justice and a former attorney general and a civil servant all my life, it's traumatic that I was demonstrating every week with my family. We had the time, I'd show you pictures with my granddaughter. And now it's a political issue. And it's something that was debated fiercely. And I don't say that, and I would never say on anything that it's perfect. There's nothing you can do to improve this or that. But what we felt, those who opposed those moves, was that it didn't come from a place of improving, it came from another place. Frankly, I'm rather sad that I am talking about it abroad, because this is something internal in Israel, but it became so publicly well known everywhere that I'm talking about it here. Now, so far the government has been, and the Knesset have been able to only implement one of the elements of that plan, which is to deprive the Supreme Court from using, the unreasonableness, which is basically extreme unreasonableness, and sometimes people forget that, in the decisions, saying, look, this government decision or this law are extremely unreasonable. And again, you can argue on that. Now it's in the Supreme Court, and I will not forecast the result. But the debate is now frozen because of the war. And Ben-Gurion, I was, the chief of staff of the late Moshe Dayan. Some of you may remember the name, the one-eyed war hero. And I began as his lawyer, then I became his chief of staff. That goes back to the post-Yom Kippur War in the 70s. I mention him because he used to tell me that Ben-Gurion, our founding father, used to draw a distinction between something that's, as he would imitate him, dead or dead and buried. Dead means it still could be revived. Dead and buried is, I think the judicial reform is now at this point, it's somewhat dead, but it's not dead and buried. And the ideas may come back. And personally, I think there could be things that could be done to get the feeling of consensus, because it split the public, but we're not there at this point. Let me say a few words about the war, which is basically what is on our mind nowadays, including this morning talking to my cousin whose son was wounded the day before yesterday and was operated on yesterday in Gaza. Nobody would believe, if you'd ask me or any Israeli, October 6th, is there a possibility that Hamas, who's been an enemy, would enter and demolish about 40 or something like that, 30 Jewish villages and kill 1,400 people, civilians in their beds, babies, elderly people, in one day? I'd say, go see your psychiatrist, you're crazy. But it happened. And why it happened will be investigated after the war. Why did intelligence, which is one of the best intelligence services on earth, have this failure? And why did the operative part fail? We lost a relative in a kibbutz, a village on the Gaza boundary, Be'eri. She was 88, and she was slaughtered there. Her husband was 90, were wounded. She's my wife's relative. And she was there since the age of 16, and then she lived there all her life, and she lost her life there. My wife and I made a point to, and I will not go on with stories because it'll take our time, but we made a point to visit families that lost their kids in Jerusalem, even though we don't know them, just out of expressing sympathy. We went to see a lady, she's of Moroccan origin, a widow. She had twins who were only children. Both were killed in that party, this big party that was one of the targets of the attack, a celebration party of the holiday. We had a holiday that day, and she lost both of them. And we were sitting there. What can you tell her? You can't tell her anything. And she said all the time, that's what she said, she's of, I think I said, from Moroccan origin. She said, the Almighty gave me the twins in one day and took them in one day. That was her line throughout our conversation. And there are many stories, and I won't go into that. Maybe one more. I chair the Israeli Preservation of Sites Society, and one of our employees lost his son in that particular party, and I came to visit, and it's in a suburb of Tel Aviv, 4th floor, no elevator, very modest, and there was an alarm of rockets while we were sitting at his apartment, and he doesn't have a shelter in the apartment, so everybody went down. He didn't want to go, so I sat with him, and I thought about this surrealistic story. He loses his son, we sit here, and then there's an alarm and so on. And the next day, he was hospitalized in a mental hospital because he collapsed. So these are human stories, but I'll say something about the legal side. And I'll open up with the others. The war is not against the civilian population of Gaza. It is against the Hamas. But Hamas is using the civilian population, and that's a fact. It's not a made-up story. Including hospitals, for their ammunition, for the headquarters, for their rocket launching areas. So if you want to fight them, the civilian population is affected. I remember when I was Attorney General, I was warning all the time that we have to be careful with civilian population in Gaza and Lebanon and so on. One day, this is 20 years ago, I'm in my office and there's a scheduled meeting with a few generals on something. And then one of them says, look, today is Sunday. Yesterday, you're warning us all the time on the civilians. Yesterday, he says, we had the Hamas leadership in its entirety in a meeting in Gaza, and we could do away with all of them, but they did it in the 4th floor of an 8th-floor building, which was populated. And we didn't do it because we would have killed the population, the people that were living in that building. So and this is now the same, but in a larger scale. And we are being criticized nowadays because of the Gaza population. Yes, there is why are we there? Because of those crimes against humanity, war crimes, kidnapping 200 plus people who somewhere in Gaza, and genocide ideas, because it's to kill Jews, it's not to kill the IDF soldiers. So we are there now, and we lose people. This morning, by the way, everybody would think it's a Jewish story. No, there was there are Arabs who are in our military who were also killed. A Druze battalion commander was buried yesterday, and I wrote, I'm friendly with the head of the Druze Arab community. I'm friendly with the head of their community. This morning...
You might want to explain the Druze situation.
The Druze are an ancient Middle Eastern Arab origin community that exists in Israel, in Lebanon, in Syria in particular, in Jordan somewhat. Most Arab Israelis don't serve in our military. Because of the conflict, they choose not to serve. Some do. The Druze do, and there are Druze generals, there are Druze colonels, there are Druze combatants, and a number of them were killed. I am very friendly with the head of the community. They are rather small, they're about 150,000 or so in Israel. And I early this morning, I sent him a WhatsApp message, Dear Sheikh Tarif, his name is Tarif. I'm so sorry about the demise of the hero. He was a hero, Colonel so-and-so, Salman Khabka, an example for all of us. My heart with the family and with the congregation, all of us praying for the peace of the combatants and the state of Israel which he defend. He answered while I was on the road to Stanford from my hotel. And he says, thank you very much. I appreciate it so much. It's a loss, a tough loss of a combatant and a commander. It's a loss to the whole state of Israel and the IDF. What comforts me, says the Sheikh, that he died in a just war to defend the state. We are all partners in our beloved, dear state. I hope we'll have better days after having victory on the enemy. That was his response. This morning, I'm reading that to show that this is not just, Jews against Arabs. It's Israelis against Hamas. And the abuse of the rights of civilians by using their homes as a shelter for the terrorists is something which makes us fight, and that's why we had to ask the Gazans to evacuate, because they may be affected, and many did. Many others were prevented by Hamas. And again, I'm speaking passionately because I believe, lawyers, who was it that said that I'm looking for a one-armed lawyer? Because all lawyers always say on one hand and on the other hand. This for me is not on one hand or the other hand, because I believe that what I said was the right thing. And they speak of, international law speaks inter alia of proportionality. What is proportionality? It's a good principle. If you have the right of self-defense, but it has to be proportional. How do you apply proportionality in this kind of a situation? 1,400 killed, so you kill 1,400? What do you ought to use your fairness, your common sense to minimize the losses to the other side, to its civilian population. So there are some means that you can use that, but there's no definition of a mathematical. You can't put proportionality into your computer and get the answer. And I'm underlining that because that's what the main thing that we are being criticized. You're not proportional. How? I'm asking you. It's a Jewish way to respond, asking the other side. I'm asking you, what would the U.S. do? Let's say from Mexico, God forbid, some gangs would come in and kill 1,400 Americans. What would the U.S. do? I'll leave it to your... last thing, because we don't want to, they say Henry VIII used to tell each and every of his wives, I won't keep you too long, so I'll try to finish, and then we'll have our conversation with Professor McConnell. The anti-Semitism is in the rise in this country. It's in the rise in other countries too. After the Holocaust, I was born 2 years after the end of World War II. And when I was growing up, the hope was that anti-Semitism would be kind of erased because of the shame of the Holocaust of 6 million, including my own family. My father's family was shot into a mass grave in the little town shtetl in Belarus. And it didn't happen. I remember in 1987, I was telling today, in 1987, I was the cabinet secretary then for Shamir, prime minister, and I was reading a lot of material about anti-Semitism, and it kind of dawned on me that it's here. And I suggested that we establish an interagency group to monitor that in our government. And Shamir said, okay. And I went to Shimon Peres, a great guy, my friend, was in our wedding. In fact, when we got married back in 1976. And he was the foreign minister. I said, I need a representative to the interagency group. And Peres was the optimist the visionary, and he says to me, Eli, governments have to deal with the present and the future. Anti-Semitism is the past. Why deal with that? And he changed his mind later. So, and it seems that you cannot uproot anti-Semitism totally, because it's in many cultures, mainly Christian, but also Arab cultures, this way or the other. But you can fight it. You can fight it by raising your head and saying it should stay in the gutter. It goes against any human rights, any civil rights. And I'm saying it in sadness, because that we do have to do this job, but we do have to do it. And I think, you know, I don't feel comfortable, but the president, I'm a professor at the Hebrew U now, and the Hebrew University, and the president of the Hebrew U sent a letter inter alia to the president of Stanford to somehow protest, was unhappy with the way the university dealt with it. I don't know what the response was later, but the notion that was on the war and all of that. I'm mentioning that because we feel genuinely that we need the support of people like you, free people, people who believe America is a fair country by definition, by its constitution, by its values. We share the same values. We are drawn into a major conflict. And this is a conflict which could have been different. I forgot to say, we evacuated Gaza in 2005 in its entirety. We, on our own, demolished, or didn't demolish, left, evacuated Jews from villages, and we were hoping, and this didn't materialize, that this will become a springboard for development, for agriculture, for industry. Instead, industry, yes, but rockets. So we are still in the middle of all of that. I'm hopeful, God willing, that we're going to win this war. And just know we're not after the Gazans, we're after Hamas. Thank you very much.
So we want to move to audience questions pretty quickly, but I will get things going just by a few questions to Justice Rubinstein. And drawing upon, you were part of every peace negotiation for 40 years, I think, and now you've been a justice and a judge, and I assume been more or less out of the foreign policy business, and may have had the chance to get a quasi-outsider's perspective. My question is, what does peace look like realistically for this part of the world?
Well, it's a very good question. I was really involved, not that many years, but almost 25 years. And I think I'm one of the two, maybe the only one now that in Israel that took part, that is in all 5 sectors of peace efforts, except for Oslo. By the way, I was bypassed in Oslo, and I was then critical of Oslo, but I did negotiate with the Palestinians many a time. Let's take the peace with Egypt and with Jordan. Peace has 2 parts, a security part and a civilian part. The security part with both Egypt and Jordan looks all right. I hope it will keep on like that, but the security relations in Egypt, by the way, they are also monitored by a multinational force which is headquartered by in Rome, and its Director General is American, and that has been going on since in the early 80s when we evacuated Sinai. I was involved in negotiations on establishing that multinational force. Unfortunately, the first American Director General was assassinated. Nobody knows today. I don't know at least why. But the civilian part is much less healthy. We have a lot of agreements with Egypt, for instance, on culture, on tourism, on just name it. And they are implemented much less. There's some tourism. Recently there was even the kill Israeli tourists, but that's unusual. But some agreements are partially implemented, much less. So we have about 50 normalization agreements. Again, I was involved in many of them, but I tell you a story. We were talking to them, and they were pushing at the time. This is to push quicker the withdrawal of Israel from Sinai at the time, and one of our generals says to them, "What's the rush? Kill a Turk and rest." And they said, "What do you mean kill a Turk and rest? We have such good relations with Turkey." So that goes back to a Yiddish story about a Jewish soldier in the Turkish-Russo war in 1878. And the mother from the little town, the shtetl, writes to her son, "Don't rush, don't overwork yourself in the war. Kill a Turk and rest." He's a soldier in the Tsarist army. Kill a Turk and rest. So he writes to her, "If I rest, the other Turk could kill me." So she says, she writes to him, "What did you do to him if you should kill him?" And so it became a kind of a saying, "Kill a Turk and rest," in Yiddish. And I had to save the situation. I said, he didn't mean a Turk, he meant a turkey. So that took care of it. But we're not happy with the implementation of the civil side. But since 1977, no wars with Egypt. There were 5 wars: 48, 56, 67, the War of Attrition, 73. No war since 77, and that is the explanation of why this peace is okay from this point of view. With Jordan is basically the same, and without an international force. The security part is okay. The normalization, bilateral, not that much.
So those are nations with working governments and so forth, whatever you may think of them. But how do you have peace in a place like Gaza, where a year after Israel's withdrawal from Gaza, the expectation, I believe, was that it would be governed by the Palestinian Authority, and a year later Hamas takes over? And how do what would peace look like there?
You're very accurate, and the hope was at the time that the peace will be by the Palestinian Authority, which was established not much earlier, and that will be the beginning of a dialogue which finally will bring up some permanent status negotiations. Didn't happen. So we have 2 challenges now, which basically connects to your remark. One is rebuilding our villages in the Gaza boundary, and we'll do it, and I didn't speak about Hezbollah and about the other nice people around, but the Other is an international challenge to rebuild Gaza. And that would require, in my view, something which will have the Palestinian Authority somehow come in, although it's not the ideal body, it's the corruption there and so on, but still, and with international supervision of this or that kind, because you can't expect otherwise that things will pacify. I hope that I'm not just speaking, from whatever delusions or whatever, but something should be done, and this is maybe the idea.
So thanks for coming back to Stanford, and thanks for
Be sure to
sharing
speak into the microphone.
Thanks for coming to.
It's good.
I'm Bruce Cahan. My Hebrew name is Yisrael, so it's always been close to me. We live in times of lots of irony. I teach ethics and finance here at Stanford, and I'm speaking to you in the law school. How is it possible that so much money could have gone into the subterranean infrastructures without anybody noticing that you had $500 million in Doha that we haven't seized yet? You've been on the court and had to take monies from parties. What is it that we didn't do in all the peacekeeping to watch the money, follow the money, to tamp it down? What did we learn as international benefactors of peace, of how to follow the money and stop it being misused this way?
Well, first of all, I think that the money question, I believe, I don't know, I'm not privy to that, but the question is very valid, but that our intelligence did know about the money, but there was, and that's something which will be investigated, the policy was kind of a hope which didn't materialize, that the money will not only be used for that, but will be used for development. This is one of the questions that has been haunting our public now with this. But I do believe that the intelligence did know what they did, know what they did, the government did. This will all be investigated. But the point is very important, because all this money from international benefactors and the Qatari money was supposed to be for development. And that, by the way, Israel has been supplying some of the water there, and about half the electricity, and allowing, I think, almost 20,000 workers every day to Israel to make their living throughout these years. But I don't have a good answer to how the money was used for all of this. And I didn't mention Iran, of course. Iran is a player in all the area. And again, the world has changed. I still remember, again, personally, visiting Iran in the 70s, and we had such extensive relations with them. We had semi-diplomatic relations, and we had commercial and military and just name it relations with them. There was a story at the time, by the way, that we had El Al flying to Tehran, and an Arab ambassador comes to the Shah at the time and says, how come El Al flies here? And the Shah says it doesn't fly here. So the ambassador says, Your Majesty, I just came from the airport and I saw the El Al plane. And the Shah says, you mean to say I'm lying? End of conversation. Yes, please.
I'm Shelley Hebert. I'm the co-president of Stanford's Jewish Alumni Organization. And I'd like to ask you a question of whether there's anything that we could learn from Israel on an issue that is very contentious, not only here at Stanford, but at other universities and campuses, and has to do with the issue of free speech. So we seem to be engaging in a somewhat Talmudic debate. Is it protected speech? Is it hate speech? Is it abhorrent speech? Is it coded speech that is actually expressing virulent ideas, death to Israel or death to Jews? And essentially it's anti-Semitic speech. So while we're debating in this Talmudic fashion, our students are being subjected to slogans and chanting and things that make them fearful. So do you have any words of advice for us, either on how Israel as a society deals with this, or any observations of what you're seeing happening here?
Well, in a way, it's big on me, this question, to be advising Americans how they deal with their First Amendment issues. But all I could say is that while we do respect free speech, and it is part of our ethos and it's part of our jurisprudence, our code has come up with that, we do. Still, there are areas of speech which are not covered by the free speech, and that doesn't mean that the press is not free and that the media are not free and the networks are not free, but there are some limits. And the question, in my view, but you have your First Amendment jurisprudence. Question is, and here is a super expert, and it's for me is can you interpret in a situation which worsens, can you interpret the First Amendment in a way that would curb on some things? I was talking to a major American lawyer, important lawyer, and he said there be extreme circumstances that we could do that. That was just yesterday, and but he didn't come up with examples. I don't know if we are there with those extreme circumstances, but anti-Semitism has to be erased, has to be fought.
I'm going to intervene here. Let's have a student question.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for being here. My name is Eli Barish. I'm a 3L at Stanford Law School and a member of the Jewish Law Students Association. I was going to ask a similar question about free speech, and I am going to ask a similar question, but your answer was mostly about the legality of regulating student speech, and really I want to call upon your wisdom about when a university should do it and what the role of the university is at a time like this. Typically, I'm opposed to universities weighing in on issues that are roiling campuses, in part because I think universities should equip students with the tools to think through issues and not tell them what to think. But personally, I've been struggling with that emotionally and intellectually. So I'm wondering, what is the role of a university in terms of moral leadership, or what can a university do that doesn't set a bad precedent of them having to weigh in on a bunch of other issues? So if you can speak to that, thank you.
Well, I think there are things you can learn from history. And the fact is that the history has an arsenal of events that occurred when people, these lines by, I forget his name, the German writer, I think it was a church person, said when they came for the socialists, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a socialist. When they came for the communists or the unions, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a union member or a socialist. When they came for that group, I didn't do any because I wasn't part of that group. And then they came to me, and there was nobody to help. That is a very strong, I'm sorry I don't have the text, but it's on the web, it's very well known. And what it tries to say is that since we are all human beings, and a university is not a mechanical place. Yes, it is supposed to teach you tools to think, to communicate, but when there is evil, and I don't speak only on anti-Semitism, it could be against the Afro-Americans at the time. It could be when Japanese here in California were detained in World War II. It could be others, and it could be Jews who've been victims throughout history. I think a fair institution, and I'm not speaking of Stanford only, and I'm a guest here, but a fair institution could weigh in and say, when I see evil, I'll say it's evil. I not only say on one hand and on the other hand. So there are cases in which you want a one-armed university.
But universities become echo chamber, like Stanford. They just say evil one side, and everyone repeat the same. The professors, the student, everything. Nobody else dare to say opposite. This is echo chamber, not
well,
everyone.
I don't say that nobody can say opposite. All I can say is that the institution as such should look at the moral side and the contents of what we're talking about and express its view as an institution. That doesn't derogate from anybody's right to say whatever they think. I don't think anybody's mouth would be shut. But the university can have its voice clear, and then it may have its repercussions on the public. That's very legitimate. Yes, please.
We are approaching the end. In fact, we've actually gone over, but let's have one more, maybe two more questions. Why don't you both ask your questions and the justice can respond to both at the same time.
Well, I think your mind is too open-ended to be answered. I was wondering if you could reflect on, as I understand it, if you at the end of this war is going to be a period of profound rethinking of a whole array of issues in Israel, and the constitutional issues you began with will be high on that list. As I understand it, going back to Ben-Gurion's original deal-making or whatever in 48, the Knesset exists in two capacities. It exists as an ordinary legislature. It has a residual authority to be a constituent assembly for constitutional purposes. It's hard for me to understand, looking at all the vicissitudes and the divisions in contemporary Israeli politics and all the instability in domestic politics in Israel, how the Knesset could ever operate in that function to kind of think systematically about what kind of constitutional changes, as Americans use that term, would be essential. So I'm just, you don't have time to answer this, but I just raise this as a question. Is the question of the mechanism and the kind of procedural deliberative rules for thinking about fundamental change in Israel, is that likely to be a question that the society can deal with on the one hand, or is it likely just to reinforce the existing divisions, or do you also think that in the aftermath of this horrible disaster, there's going to be a remaking of Israeli public opinion that will make fundamental change possible?
Thank you.
Let's hear the second question, too.
Thank you very much. My name is Giora Ben Yaakov, and I want to ask a question about the first part of your talk, about the Supreme Court, the role of the Supreme Court. All the time that I hear, there are two basically camps in Israel. One, the government camps that are very extreme right, that they feel that the Supreme Court don't support the settlers' position enough, and the other side against it. But I never hear anything what the Arabs, the Palestinian people, both in Israel and the West Bank, how they feel about the role of the Supreme Court. Because I think officially, I think the West Bank is still under occupied, and I don't know, I don't know the international law, but I don't know how the Palestinians feel about all of these things.
Well, as far as the first question, you rightly described the mechanism as it stands. There's a difference between an objective and a subjective look at it. Objectively, and I'm saying it sadly, we could have had a full-fledged package constitution, because because what is the main opposition for the last 20, 25 years to finalizing constitution? The apprehension that the court will abuse the power and so on. And the court shouldn't deal with constitutional issues, no judicial review. That was the idea. But now it's already accepted that the court can do a judicial review, only not in basic laws, they say, but in general law, yes. So why no, because state and religion, because of this and that. As a lawyer, as a judge, as an attorney general, as an Israeli, I would love, and I was hoping since I became attorney general in '97 that in my day we will see a constitution, a full-fledged constitution. It didn't happen, and I don't think we're going to see it very soon. So objectively, it's possible. Subjectively, there are apprehensions and fears which are beyond the objective. So if you ask me whether I see it tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, the answer is no. If I still groom the hope, the answer is yes. As far as that question on the Israeli Arabs, it's interesting. In the beginning, Israeli Arabs were shy. I don't speak of Palestinians, that's not their issue. But Israeli Arabs, 20% of the population, were shy to react, and but most of them have been using the court in petitions to get their rights better served, and I think that if you ask, but some of them still. There's a professor, an Arab professor, he's not the only one. His name is Muhammad Watad. He's the dean of the law school of Tzfat, a northern law school. He is raising his voice also on the war, by the way, which is very courageous, that the war is a just war and so on. And some people like him say it publicly that the court is necessary for, and it is necessary. And I'll add one point. In the nation laws, one of the basic laws, there's an article on equality which doesn't exist, and which doesn't derogate from the idea of the Jewish state, Jewish democratic state, and we need a Jewish state. And I was one of those who promoted the idea of this article to be included. This colonel, Druze colonel that died in war this week, what they quoted in the media that I saw here was that he was so devoted to the country and was disappointed that this article wouldn't be included, and that's my view too. Let me finish. I understand we are done. First of all, I want to thank Professor McConnell and also all of you that attended, and I want to say, having all of these complex problems, I am very proud to be an Israeli. I'm very proud that we have the state of Israel. with its shortcomings, with its not being perfect, who is perfect. I'm very proud of our court. I'm very proud of the fact that I could, an anecdote, short anecdote. In 1992, I accompanied Prime Minister Rabin to Kennebunkport, Maine, where President Bush, the father, had his summer resort. We were negotiating loan guarantees to Israel. I won't go into that, and I was instrumental in that. This is August of 1992. On our way back in the airplane, it dawned on me that it was 14 August 1992. 14 August 1942, my father's family was shot into that mass grave in Belarus with the whole little town, the shtetl. And I wrote an article in a newspaper, and I said, look, 50 years have gone by on the day, and we have and I'm sure that my grandparents who were shot into that mass grave would have been proud to see their grandson representing a Jewish independent state. I'm still proud. Thank you.